Hi, welcome to Geekery and Academia. I'm your instructor, Dr. Mike. Here at Geekery and Academia, I discuss a wide range of topics and issues from comic books, novels, movies, and video games to education, history, college life, and graduate school, and whatever else pops into my silly little head. Thank you for joining me in this organized chaos. And today I'm discussing the graduate school's preliminary/comprehensive exam and the process there. Now, this really only applies if your program still requires an extended comprehensive exam process, as many graduate programs are slowly phasing them out in favor of a broader portfolio-based process. And again, then this in particular is largely focused on a history doctoral program, but there is some overlap and expectations with other programs in the social sciences. So what are comprehensive exams? These exams are considered the midway point of a doctoral program that are completed before you move on to the dissertation phase. But you might also experience them at the master's level as an alternative to writing a thesis. Comps in particular are designed to be a time-consuming process that gauges your familiarity with the scholarship of your field. So different programs will make their exams, their comprehensive exams in different ways, but the basics will have you working with your dissertation advisor and a committee of professors that you select. So obviously when picking your committee, you want to select people relevant to your field, but also specialize in subjects that you know less about, but would still benefit your research and certainly help your dissertation. So in particular with history comps themselves, you will mostly deal with different genres that focus on your specialties, but also include analytically adjacent fields, and sometimes even a subject outside of your field entirely. So specifically, like history comps are typically divided into time periods, themes, and national histories. So using my comps for an example, my comps were divided into 5 different sections. I had a section on colonial America to the Civil War, another section mostly focused on civil rights history from the 1900s to the present day United States. My third section focused on Chicano, Latino history, and my fourth section was on the history of Mexico, and my fifth section was on queer theory, particularly looking at media studies. Now, how much work you have to do going into comps will be totally dependent upon your advisor and committee. So you'll be working closely together with them to design your reading lists and creating a foundation of what your exams would look like. And if you're fortunate enough to have a flexible committee, you will have far greater control on how everything is going to turn out. Now on to the fun part, the reading lists. So you almost likely have a very different experience when it comes to getting the reading lists from myself and other graduate students, because our experiences differ. But these are some things you should expect. So different professors will for sure do it differently. That range from a wide variety. So for example, with my particular comps, my advisor gave me a pretty lengthy reading list of around 300 plus books and articles, but he allowed me to select around 100 that I would use, that I would study and use. 2 of the members of my committee allowed me to make my list completely from scratch before having final approval over it. And the other 2 committee members I had, they gave me a finished list that I had no say in making any edits for. Now, looking at that experience, in all honesty, I can't tell you which is better. It is stressful to be given a list that you have no say over, but it's also equally as stressful to make up your own list or narrowing a list down. So the only thing I can really say about that is I hope you enjoy what you read. When it comes to reading lists though, I would say history programs tend to have the largest lists, so just FYI. Other fields tend to have much shorter lists, but on average, if you're doing a history program, you should expect to have between 300 to 500 books and articles that you need to read. My final list was around 500 plus books and articles, the majority of which were books. So I ended up getting my lists, my finished lists around the end of spring, the very beginning of summer, and I would take my exams that October. So I had very little time and to get all this reading done, so I kind of had to rush a little bit. But again, luckily, other fields you won't have much as much of a reading list. Typically, history programs are pretty evil in that respect. But luckily, many history programs are phasing out the comps process again, or at least making a larger effort to reduce the reading lists. So it's won't be as traumatizing experience for newer graduate students. And so when it comes to actually reading these books themselves, here are some things you should know ahead of time. For starters, nobody's actually expecting you to read everything line by line by line by line. It is impossible given the amount of books and articles that you have to read that you would actually finish anything within 6 months. Realistically, you're only going to be reading just their introductions and the conclusion chapters, then maybe a book review or two at the most. Also, here's another quick piece of advice if you're putting your own book list together. I highly recommend that you select books that you are planning to use for your dissertation. That will save you so much time and also give you a better idea when you're working on a dissertation, what books will be the most relevant for you. And I would also suggest adding books that you already read for your graduate seminars into your reading lists if they are relevant to the field. That way, if you already took good notes, wrote some book reviews for them, then you just probably would need to just skim over the introduction real quick for a quick refresher and just update your notes a little bit. So that way, another thing that would save you a lot of time. Now looking into the actual reading, here are some things I suggest you take notes on. Be sure to make a full citation of the book. That way it will save you a lot of time when you're having to professionally cite it. I personally made both the footnote and note entry and the bibliographic citation. That way I had both ready to go to just copy and paste whenever I needed them. And for your own notes as well, be sure to include the purpose of the book, its central thesis, and the other arguments that it makes. And also be sure to make note of the types of sources that they're using, if they're maybe using a specific collection or relying on oral histories more. Those are going to be some things you want to know about. And also obviously include any key points like what the scholar is adding to the field, or if they're directly responding to other scholars' work. So those are things you'll want to be sure to have ready when you're going into the exams, as well as when you're writing the dissertation. Now, when you're done reading and gearing up for the exams, here is some of my recommendations for how to study. Very first, meet with your individual committee members to get sample questions. Sometimes they'll give you general questions that they gave in the past, but sometimes you'll have to create your own questions to study with. But be sure to have them review the questions because they'll so often rewrite your questions into a way that they would give you for the exam. That way it helps you get a better idea of how you should be studying, but also gives you a framework of how your committee members are going to ask their questions. And once you have those questions, then start drafting some brief essays, maybe a couple outlines, using around a dozen or so books from your lists. So in my case, I had about 100 books per list. And when it came to the exams themselves, I really only referenced about 8 of them, maybe 15 at the maximum. So again, pick the ones that you will remember or seem the most important to you, or most interesting to you. Now here's when you're actually doing their comps. They are generally set up within a 2 to 3 week window. You'll have the written examination and then an oral defense with your committee. So for the written exams, you'll either be writing them at home or on campus with a strict deadline set up of either a full day to write your papers or 8 hours or anything in between. And particularly for on-campus exams, you'll know ahead of time if you need to bring your own computer or if you're going to be using, say, the department's computer from the computer lab, or and as well as if you'll be allowed to use your own notes for the exam. So I had 2 on-campus exams, one of which I was only allowed to bring my book lists and no notes, while the other exams I wasn't allowed to bring anything at all. So I had to fully memorize everything in advance. So those are 2 things you need to think about when you're going into the comps. One thing I want to help you point out, just so you know you're not losing it, the written exams are incredibly stressful, especially if you're not allowed to use your notes or your book lists. So your memory will play tricks on you, just so you know ahead of time. And you're certainly going to blank on all the names of scholars and the books and articles that you want to use. So in those situations, while you can't bring anything into the campus exams, I highly recommend that as soon as the exam begins, that you jot down every book and scholar you can think of, so you can have that reference, something to reference back to later as you're writing. Now, the other thing you need to know about written exams is that you need to be on it when it comes to time management. If it is an on-campus exam, get there as early as possible to make the most of your time, and be sure to bring your own food and drinks so you don't have to wait in line somewhere at the cafeteria or whatever lunchrooms they have available. And also bring your own laptop just in case, even if the department says you're going to be using their computers, because it will never fail that somehow they always end up double booking rooms. They ended up having more students doing the exams, and so that means they're going to be short on computers, or the computer that the department has ends up breaking. So if you have your computer on hand, you're safe. You're not going to lose any time if that happens. And trust me, at least for one of the exams, it will probably happen. Now, if you're doing take-home exams, be very, very strict with your schedule, because you will lose all your time if you decide just to watch a little bit of TV to clear your head. Those little breaks you think you're taking to give yourself a little rest ends up biting yourself in the ass with take-home exams more so than on-campus exams. So once you're all done with your written exams, you'll move on to the oral defense. That is where your entire committee comes together in a room, classroom, or via Zoom to ask you questions based on your essays. So you should expect questions on things you have missed in your essays, underdeveloped points, or maybe even things that your committee member found particularly interesting that they want you to elaborate more on. And all of that will also go back to asking you how your comps are helping you to set up for your dissertation, such as the books you want to reference, theoretical frameworks that will be helpful, or just scholars that you're going to talk shit about. But they might also ask you questions, because especially with doctoral programs, they are expecting you that you'll end up being a teacher, a professor, lecturer somewhere. So they'll probably be asking you, hey, what book, articles would you want to use in the classroom, either as for your own personal prep work or to assign to students for reading. Now, here's the good thing about the oral defense. You are going to stress out more about it than is really necessary. Like pretty much with your graduate school seminars, but particularly with the oral defense. Just so you know, your committee would not set the defense date if they didn't think you could handle it. For the most part, the oral defense is just a formality, as it almost never has any influence on their decision to let you move on to the dissertation phase. Really, the only way you can fail your oral defense is if you don't show up at all. Like, once the oral defense is scheduled, you're pretty much guaranteed to pass. So be sure to show up and be sure to be on time, and you'll pass. So whenever you're gearing up for comps, Just brace yourself for plenty of headaches and give yourself plenty of treats for all that hard work you're about to do. That's really all I can say about prepping for comps, but if you have any more questions about the comps process, as someone who survived and has many friends who are also in graduate school who also survived their comps, leave some comments down below and I'll get back to you with some more tips and helpful strategies for you to help pass and survive, especially survive your comps process. So that's it for today. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. I post videos every Tuesday and Thursday. You can also follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Tumblr. I'm Dr. Mike, and I'll see you next time. Bye.